They say that sleep is the cousin of death, a free trial of sorts, and certainly in Elden Ring there is a huge connection between both of them. In many pieces of dialogue and lore, we find that the two words are used interchangeably, from Godwyn's deathbed dream where we fight the ancient dragon Fortisax, to the soulless dead demigods who are said to be slumbering, and finally Roger's dialogue before his death, where he says that he is on the verge of falling into deep, fathomless slumber. From the dawn of time, our ancestors searched through the realm of sleep and how it's connected to death. In Elden Ring, though, we can see the transition between sleep and death with our own eyes. We were told many times during the base game of the sweet and gentle powers of sleep possessed by Saint Trina, a power that could ease the pain of her followers and even relieve the pain of the frenzied flame. But in the Shadowlands, things take a wild turn. Saint Trina, the alter ego of Miquella, was abandoned by him, and it changed her forever. The loss of her other half and her love, Miquella, turned the sweet and gentle Saint of Sleep into something much more darker. And From Software did an excellent job portraying that through both items and environmental storytelling. The pale purple Trina's lilies were recolored into a deep, dark shade of purple. Her sword also got the same treatment with a new dialogue explaining what's happening. Silver Sword of Saint Trina, now stained the color of velvet, inflicts eternal sleep. When Saint Trina was abandoned, the faint light purple mists coalesced into an intoxicating deep purple cloud. We can see here how FromSoft is trying to paint a transition from gentle sleep into eternal sleep. The normal Trina's lilies tells us how this plant was used to dull the senses and prevent agitation, while the deep purple lilies are like a syrupy poison that will put you into eternal sleep. Eternal sleep, which is just a little step before death, and to some inhabitants of the lands between equals death. Now let's categorize the different shades of purple we have in Elden Ring. First, the original pale purple of Saint Trina, which induces gentle, sweet slumber. Then the deep purple, which induces eternal sleep and is fatal to some of the inhabitants of the lands between. But there is a third. What if we concentrated purple even more? In that case, we will get dusky violet, or what is known as the color Gloam. And this brings us to the most mysterious character in the lands between, the Gloam Eyed Queen. Starting with the most obvious trait of the Gloam Eyed Queen, the color Gloam. Gloam can actually refer to a couple of different colors, but we do have an in-game visual representation of a Gloam Eye, the Eye of Melina in the Frenzied Flame ending. During this ending, Melina gains the power of destined death, and her closed eye opens, revealing a Gloam Eye. By analyzing the color of Melina's eye in that ending, we will find that it's dusky violet, which is the color of true death. We can see here how the version of Saint Trina we find in the Shadowlands is a midpoint between sleep and death. A midpoint between the pale purple of sleep and the violent violet of death. But the color purple doesn't just appear recently with Saint Trina. In matter of fact, the color purple was always associated with death from way before Marika's Golden Order. You are probably familiar with Ghost Flame, the white flame that was used long ago to burn the dead and give everyone equal treatment in death. There's a misconception though. Ghost Flame isn't actually white. The Ghost Flame we see now is tarnished, stripped of its original color, and that color is purple. The Grave Violet's item description states the following: a purple flower that blooms in graveyards, the hue of Ghost Flame. It's believed to be useful in calling forth spirits. We can see here how purple was the original color of ghost flame, but this isn't the only evidence. We know that ghost flame was used by the death rite birds to burn the dead. Those birds are the children of the twin bird. The twin bird is an envoy of an outer god long speculated to be the god of death. Now the twin bird motif is that of blue and red. We can see that very evidently on the twin bird kite shield and the branch swords. But why red and blue? The most obvious answer is because they represent HP and mana, or rather the loss of them, which means death. But there is more. What if we mix the color red and blue? We actually get, you guessed it, purple, the original color of ghost flame. This motif appears again in the Shadowlands, represented by the blue Cerulean coast and the red Sharrow's hidden grave. Sharrow is probably derived from Karen, the Greek pharaoh of the dead, and who is the inspiration behind the Tibia Mariners. The Mariners who are said to be the first of the Gravekeepers, and whose design is following a purple color palette. Also behind them we can clearly see a purple lantern. Can you see now how the color purple appears all around death? It's of no surprise now that we find Saint Trina deep below the Cerulean coast, buried in a land that represents the very union of red and blue, a place that quite literally forms her color, her domain. It's not a coincidence, it is theme. Now let's talk more about Ghost Flame and how it connects Saint Trina and the Gloam Eyed Queen. But before we do this, I wanted to say that most of my viewers aren't actually subscribed. So if you like the video so far, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's highly appreciated. In order to reach the Garden of Deep Purple, where Saint Trina now resides, we have to go through the Fissure Depth, the place where we can find huge arcs that lost their purpose a long time ago, and now holds the remains of impure lives. We were told that those impure lives were given equal treatment in death by being burned with ghost flame. Those impure lives, when left like that, eventually becomes putrescence. When the flames were lost to time, those impure lives couldn't rest anymore until Saint Trina arrived. The putrescent night remembrance states the following: all tainted flesh eventually becomes putrescence, and this clump of it imbibed Saint Trina's nectar, which granted it eternal rest. We can see here how Saint Trina holds the power of Ghost Flame in a different way. Just like Ghost Flame gave tainted flesh eternal rest by burning them, Saint Trina gave them eternal rest through her powers. The powers of eternal sleep, which is fatal to us but reacted differently when imbibed by the dead. The putrescent night became the night of Saint Trina. Now here comes the twist. The putrescent night internal file name is actually called the Gloam Eyed Queen Night, which sparked a lot of controversy. Did FromSoft originally plan something more for the putrescent night? Was the lore retconned? Well, I personally don't believe so. As I already illustrated, there is a huge connection between sleep and death in the lands between, and therefore a huge connection between Saint Trina and the Gloam Eyed Queen. This thin line between sleep and death was always an intriguing question in the human mind, and in Elden Ring, they try to explore this thin line and show us how sleep can turn into death. As George R.R. Martin, the author of a big portion of Elden Ring's lore, said, sleep is a little death. It shows how it was always a theme he wanted to follow from the very beginning. We can even see this in reverse if we look at yet another boss who connects Saint Trina to the Gloam Eyed Queen, the Godskins. For a long time now, the Godskins duo boss fight gave Elden Ring players a very hard time. A very widely known method to deal with that unfair boss fight was the sleep ailment. This specific status effect has a very interesting interaction with the Godskins. They fall to sleep almost immediately. What's really interesting is that they are the only main bosses that can actually fall asleep. All the other bosses will only get staggered for a moment, but not the Godskins. They even have a sleep animation. Now the question is why? Why are the Godskins so susceptible to sleep? We already partially answered that question by illustrating the connections between sleep and death in the lands between. But there is more. The Godskin Swaddling Cloth states the following. The Gloam Eyed Queen cradles newborn apostles swaddled in this cloth. Soon they will grow to become the death of the gods. We can see here how the Gloam Eyed Queen used to cradle the Godskins, and cradling a baby usually ends up in putting him or her to sleep. That's why the Godskins are so susceptible to sleep. It reminds them of their mommy cradling them. More interestingly, it showcases how the Gloam Eyed Queen is also connected to sleep. It seems she shared some of the powers of Saint Trina. Now the question is why? Why FromSoft insists on emphasizing the transition between sleep and death. I believe they are trying to indirectly reveal the identity of the Gloam Eyed Queen. In order to truly understand the lore of Elden Ring, you need to view it as a cycle. But instead of a circle, it's more of a spiral, where events recur but they do not happen exactly as before. It is merely a cycle. Stand before the Elden Ring, become the Elden Lord. Now we can all agree that the story of Miquella is a retelling of Marika's journey. Yes, it's slightly different, but the key points are the same. As I said, it's a spiral. But Miquella had an alter ego that he had to abandon on his way to divinity. An alter ego that upon abandonment almost became death. This alter ego literally sent you to kill and stop Miquella from reaching divinity, which is a really familiar arc, right? It's very close to the story of Marika and the Gloam Eyed Queen, especially the part where Marika sends Malicus to defeat the Gloam Eyed Queen. Now, judging by the similarities between Saint Trina and the Gloam Eyed Queen, as well as Miquella's journey being a retelling of that of Marika, I think it's highly likely that just like Miquella had to abandon his alter ego before achieving divinity, Marika too abandoned her alter ego, an alter ego that wasn't much different from the Saint of Sleep. She was just a more concentrated form of sleep, death itself, the Gloam Eyed Queen. This would explain why FromSoft focused so much on showcasing the transition between gentle sleep and the much darker version of it. It would explain why they focused so much on the connections between sleep and death, and why they called the putrescent night the Gloam Eyed Queen night. Not an oversight or retcon, but indirect storytelling. Now, the idea that the Gloam Eyed Queen was an aspect of Marika isn't new. In matter of fact, my top performing video on the channel was over 75,000 views and thousands of likes and comments is talking about that idea, where I go over some crazy hidden connections between those two characters and try to build a coherent theory on what exactly happened. If you didn't watch that video, you need to watch it right now. Alongside this video, it will seal the deal for you regarding the full story of Marika and her alter ego, the Gloam Eyed Queen. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like and subscribe button and tell me in the comments what you think. Until next video, farewell, fellow Tarnished.